All right. Welcome, everyone, to this radcast of the Collective Intelligence Block Party. We're at block party number 14, and we've just been doing what's on the agenda is called the Rise and Shine portion, where we're just kind of waking up and having coffee. And now, for my proposal, we're going to jump right into the topic of the conversation. So this is something I've been thinking and writing about a lot the last few days. And let me just kind of give some context for it, okay? So of all the things that are happening all around the world, including all the different projects and nonprofits and initiatives and so many things, many of which are very, very good, others of which are not so good. But if you look at the sum total of all the projects that are happening in the world today, and then you zoom out like to James's artwork, where you just look at the planet as a whole, right? The planet as a whole, despite all these great projects that are happening here, there, and everywhere, including the Block Party, including Radish, including all these great things that are happening, zoom out at a macro level, we're in a death spiral, and the death spiral is accelerating. We're going down, down, down. So in general terms, there's two possibilities. There are projects within the mix that need to be removed, or there's something that's not in the mix that's missing that needs to be inserted, right? And I think it's pretty clear that both are the case, but let's focus on one thing that's missing, that's sorely missing, that for me is like the elephant in the room, and that is what I simply call the conversation. And the conversation is simply this. The conversation seeks to address the question, how do we save life on Earth, right? And here's a way to kind of put it into some perspective. Let's say that, there was a scientifically verifiable asteroid that's coming towards Earth and it's going to hit in 5 years. And let's just assume that there was no pandemic and, everything's just kind of business as usual. We're kind of going along. And then somebody with a telescope up in Greenland or something sees this asteroid one night and says, whoa, puts the word out through the appropriate astronomy networks. It's verified from Australia to Africa to wherever. It's been verified. Okay, so this asteroid's coming, and it's out in the news. That would be the talk of the world. How do we prevent this asteroid from taking us out? Do we send up a bunch of nuclear weapons? Do we send up some gravity waves and divert its course? But what do we do? That would be on every nightly news, right? So isn't it fascinating that in today's world, there is virtually a complete absence outside of circles like ours, which, let's face it, at the moment are pretty niche, pretty fringe, right? We're certainly not mainstream here. But so aside from these fringe gatherings like ours, nobody is talking about the elephant in the room. How do we avert disaster, right? How do we save life on Earth? How do we get through this bottleneck, right? It's the big question of our time, and it's being ignored, right? And it's not that it's being entirely ignored, because look, you get on a typical collective intelligence block party, you jump in, and they're talking about feeding people, or they're talking about SRM, or they're talking about whatever. So we've been talking about parts of it, right? And what I've become really clear is that what's missing is a conversation on the whole of it. A conversation about how do we save life on Earth. So as I've talked about in the last couple of meetings, as I've zeroed in on this topic. There's different ways of structuring the conversation. Okay, so I'll talk briefly about that. And jump in, guys. Let's make this a conversation, not a speech. But the way that I'm choosing to structure it is, for me, just the simplest, most clear. Right? Any story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Right? The conversation about how to save life on Earth, I believe, likewise, should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The end, except in this case, we probably start from the end. The end is the goal. What do we want to get to, right? The beginning is where we are right now. And the middle is what I would simply describe as the pathway between where we are and where we need to get to. I also use strategy associated with that, because that pathway is fundamentally the fulfillment of a strategy that says, hey, here's how we can get from here to there. So I believe we need to have an articulation of the goal beyond simply saving life on Earth, right? Because, you know, what do we save it like in 2020 and then 2021 we'll see? And what does it mean to save life on Earth, right? What kind of an existence would be promoting and supportive of life on Earth, and how do we get to that? So we need to have a conversation around the goal. Like, what are we trying to get to? And a quote that I like by, it was a Russian writer, like before the revolution or something like that. And he said, "The starving man does not dream of porridge. The starving man dreams of caviar." And so what I like about that saying is that it just points out in very tactile terms that we're not going to get inspired by just, hey, let's figure out how to survive this next year and then kick the can down the road. So it's not just, you know, a short-term little fix. How, you know, let's get a goal that's inspiring to us, like an existence here on Earth that's actually deeply meaningful, where we're not just destroying everything in our wake, and where we're in harmony. And, you know, this could be such a utopia. You know, it's not like we lack natural resources. It's not like we lack technology. It's not like we lack brains. It's not like we lack a heart or conscience. Or we have everything we need to create a paradise. So anyway, I'm just saying, for me, the logical starting place is, where do we want to get to, right? We've got a reasonably good grasp of where we are and how we got here, but where do we want to get to, and what's the strategy? So I break it down into 3 chunks: goal, strategy, and then the third part is at the very beginning. What do we do right now? What should be our immediate next 3 steps? 1, 2, 3. What do we do? Okay. But that's one way of framing the conversation of how to save life on Earth into those 3 stages. There may be other ways of framing it. I'm sure there are, and that's fine, right? Frame away, try different framings. But again, back to my central thesis. What is missing from humanity right now is the conversation. How do we save life on Earth? How do we transform to a whole new modality? How do we get through this bottleneck of exponential planetary overheating? One of the parts of the answer is, how do we cool the planet? But we need a whole answer, right? To paraphrase, I guess it was Churchill, the time for half measures is over. We need a whole answer now, right? And so again, going back to my original context, there's just gazillions of projects and this and that and ideas and blah, 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 blah. And there have been for a half a century, longer, but we continue on this death spiral down, right? Something is not working in this whole big picture. And I think that a frank conversation about the big, because here's the thing, if we think about it in Buckminster Fuller terms, don't try to change someone's thinking, don't try to change people's minds, give them a tool that changes them. Consider for a moment that the conversation, how do we change, how do we save life on Earth, what do we do, is a tool. Think of that conversation as a tool which actually changes people. Because before I get into that conversation, what am I wake up in the morning, I'm worried about money, I'm worried about viability, I'm worried about future, I'm worried about food, do I have enough food stockpiled? You know, I'm worried about all these little things in the big picture, right? But as soon as I'm invited into a conversation about the big picture, suddenly now I'm thinking big. And suddenly I'm also realizing that, hey, yeah, we are going down. Life on Earth is now on the chopping block. And, yeah, you know, so you see how it can change a person just getting into the conversation. So, so here's how I see it, okay? We are all of us who are like progressive, those of us who are in the Block Party and on Rebel Wisdom or Extinction Rebellion or who are there, you know, these different groups, Foresight Institute, whatever. I'm just going to call us the progressives, right? The people who get it, right? The people who get it, oh my goodness, we're having Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting and setting up this conference and now what and this, that, and that, the Sign Network, and you know, we're all over it. But here's how I look at it. All of us progressives, first of all, we're in a bunch of little enclaves, and yeah, we mix it up a bit. You know, we're basically friendly, minus the violence that I was talking about earlier. But aside from that, we're basically friendly to each other, and we talk to each other, and we're open. But imagine that all these progressive communities are like on an isolated island in the Pacific that's not even on the world map, right? We're very isolated from the rest of the world as a group, right? The rest of the world is figuring out, you know, how do we get back to work? How do we get back to business as usual, right? Which implies a total, you know, lack of understanding of the present predicament. So my point is that here we are, this niche community of communities that's really not very well integrated, right? I mean, there are groups on the island that hate each other. There are groups on the island that don't know about each other. I mean, we are not one big happy Switzerland, you know, as a confederation of cantons or whatever that just works. No, we're a non-confederation of progressive communities that doesn't work, right? And again, we're not even on the map of the rest of the world. So the way I see it, it's we're at a crossing of the chasm moment. Raise your hand if you've heard of the book called Crossing the Chasm. And I think that came out in the 90s or something, maybe early 2000s, but it's a business book that a lot of techies read years ago that basically analyzes that, you know, there's some early adopters, right? Oh, so you launch the iPad. Well, there's some people that'll rush out and get the iPad, right? Because they're early adopters. But then most people are kind of looking at it askance or not even aware of it or whatever. And then there's kind of this chasm period. And then once you cross it and get to the other side, that's where you get mass adoption, whether it's a product, a service, an idea, whatever, right? So here we are, these early adopters of this idea that the world's going down and we need to do something radical, right? But what we really need is we need to get into, you know, significant percentage points of humanity who are on the court, in the game, playing the real game, right?
I'll interject.
Yeah.
Just give you a little break. First of all, I don't think your audio is quite as good as it has been. Just to let you know, that's my personal opinion.
No.
You're using these earbuds now. Is that something new?
Yeah, the thing is, I'm using a different computer than the one I was normally using. The one I was normally using, I wasn't using earbuds.
And anyway, just to let you know, it's not like it's not it's not a big problem, but I'm just letting you know, I don't think it's the quality of audio you've had in the past.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to know.
So
I think that was because your mic was unmuted, Miles.
oh, could be.
think-
All right, maybe.
Yeah, I think
start
anyone's mic,
muting.
it does
Okay,
interfere with it.
maybe
alright,
it
if
was
you
me.
wanna mute.
Okay, I will mute when I'm off here. So yeah, the conversation. What is the conversation? Where are we? We're here now. We want to get to that desired condition, and we need strategy in between. So I'll present what I think is the conversation that is needed. And I want to always give credit to the indigenous people that came up with this. And I heard it from Faithkeeper Oren Lyons of the Haudenosaunee. He is in upstate New York. But the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois people, Six Nations, we sliced them in half with the Canada-US border. They live on both sides of the border. They came up with, and I don't know how many years ago this was, but they had a convention or conference, and they came up with the conversation that's needed, and they coined it value change for survival. Value change for survival. So the conversation has to be, what is our value? What do we value? You know, do we value life on Earth or not? Hello.
Welcome, Charlie. Charlie, welcome. Good to see you.
Charlie.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Hi,
There you go.
everyone. I'm just chiming in briefly for now. I'll come back later, I guess. I miss you guys and glad to be here. How's everyone? I'm just seeing who's here on my phone here.
Yeah. No, we're good. We're good. We're having a conversation about what we call the conversation. And the conversation, as I'm...
Is it only meta or is it meta?
it's actually meta. So make sure you keep the metas straight. You know, meta.
Is that 4 or it's not about the number? Yeah.
It's actually pi to the 1.4 power, so it's a little more than 4. You know, we're getting into kind of some topological areas here. But let me put it in more simple terms. The conversation is, and this is a conversation that's sorely missing from the world, and it's a very simple one. How do we save life on Earth?
Yeah.
How do we get through this bottleneck? And the way I'm framing it is, there's gazillions of products.
Quick, save life or lives? Which did you say?
Save life generally.
Got it. Thanks.
How do we save life? And you know, that's one way of phrasing it. Another way of phrasing it is, how do we get through this present bottleneck? You know, with so many threats and so much overheating and this and that. And part of the context is that there's gazillions of projects and movements and groups and this doing this and that. I mean, there's the BlackBerry, there's this, you know, including our own. There's so many things going on that seek to do this or do that or change this or change that. But number one, in spite of all these best efforts, we're still going down. Number two, there's the big macro conversation where you could imagine folks like us, some of the leaders of Rebel Wisdom, some of the leaders of Extinction Rebellion, you yourself, Charlie, Lauren, you can imagine all of us getting together and saying, all right, brass tacks, what do we need to do to save life on Earth? And the answer to that question could come in the form of some big political revolution. It could come in the form of some big mass movement that's just now starting, but then just explodes. And, you know, some form
I have
of
a quick answer.
Please.
Can I offer a quick answer? it can kind of flip back and forth in two ways. So it's like two variations on so get it together to get together, or get together to get it together, whichever way you like. That's how I see it.
And I totally agree. I see it the latter, get together to get it together, because the first step is coming together, and then getting it together is when we have the conversation. And so
it could also be meta, like sort of get it together to get together to get it together. Like it kind of bounces around like a little infinity loop or something. But not to anyway get too lost in the conversation. That's you know, just underscore the get shit done. The hashtag GSD. This guiding principle of the collaboratory of Lauren and my CICOLAB. It sort of was formed out of the ashes of a lot of blah 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 for like a really long time in a lot of groups.
Yeah, and so they're saying, okay, let's get shit done. GSD, love it. But part of the GSD is precisely getting together to have the conversation. And then there are people who are saying, oh, you're just talking. Well, we you know, before we could.
But what do you do with that? I think that's where we come back in with the workflow and the processing and get to the wisdom and all that. Anyway, I have quick answers, which is not, I know it's not about quick answers.
Yeah, no, well, it is and it isn't. It's all good. This is the conversation, and this is what we need to have. And but you could just imagine a parallel scenario where like an asteroid is coming towards the Earth, and it's been detected and verified by dozens of astronomers. So it's definitely there, it's definitely coming, it's on target, and the ETA is 5 years from now. That would be on the nightly news everywhere, every night. You know,
yeah, but then you know what happens is just, and then another one comes out of nowhere, like one day to the next.
This is true, and that's a good analogy of where we are in our present world. You know, 6 months ago, all I was talking about was global warming and how do we, you know, cool the planet. Now I'm juggling, you know, pandemic, economic collapse, loss of global dimming, political instability, war, you know, food, all this stuff. And so, regardless, there is a missing conversation at a very high level that says, hey, let's look at this big picture, right? We all have a pretty good, all of us people, we all have a reasonably good grasp of what the hell is going on. It's not perfect, but, you know, it's not like we're blind. And
you mean here in the room here, more or less?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Yeah.
People like us who are in the conversation, who are dialed in. And yet, even amongst ourselves, we're, you know, in my experience, we tend to rush towards one project or another. Let's do this or let's do that. But how often do we sit back and say, wait a second, okay, big picture. How do we get out of this mess, right? And so that's something we've been grappling with. We actually have an answer. We're not calling it the answer. That would be far too arrogant and misguided. But we do have an answer. And our current answer, when I say our, we'll talk about who is the our, but our current answer is start an initiative to feed everyone, in turn, starting in Brooklyn, New York, launch it with a press conference that says, hello world, we've got this massive set of problems. We are now unveiling a massive set of solutions, and it's called Operation Stone Soup, just like the story. And we're starting right here. We're starting right here in Brooklyn, and we're going to be delivering whole food, plant-based foods, immune boosting, to everyone in Brooklyn, right? So that people can stay home, so that they can be healthy, so that they get their immune systems boosted up and everything like that. But just like the story Stone Soup, it wasn't just about the food, right? It was about bringing community together, collaborating, creating community, eating together, talking together, working together, right? And so my hypothesis is that let's say we go with this solution and we're able to get it together. We must start it with a press conference to get the word out to the whole world, because the way I see it, there's this chasm, right? There are these early adopters of this kind of progressivism that characterizes us, right? We're in the conversation, we're developing collective intelligence, putting it into practice and doing all this cool stuff. But we're far less than 1% of all of humanity, right? We're just a tiny, tiny little fraction. In fact, the way I say it metaphorically is all of our communities, yours and mine and all of ours, it's like we're all on Gilligan's Island in the middle of the Pacific. And Gilligan's Island isn't even on the map. You know, we're all talking to each other. Right? Exactly. So, you know,
a 3-hour tour, haha.
Exactly. But
can I just pitch in a little bit here?
Yeah.
So I think what you're planning with Brooklyn Eats is really an important entry point, because I think one of the issues from my perspective is you have to engage people where they want to be engaged, and not clobber them, you know. So example, I was talking before we started recording about being a member of Toastmasters, and I was a member of a club for a year. Then I thought, this isn't working for me. And the reason is because I wanted to talk about real serious existential issues. However, you know, most people go to Toastmasters, I want to learn to have a better skill at public speaking. And they probably don't really want to hear Miles coming in and giving presentations about global collapse and, you know, global warming and sixth mass extinction, right? I detected that, you know, when I even tried to enter into some of that, the people didn't want to hear that. They want to come and have an hour and a half of some friendly educational experience. So that's where I clued into thinking, oh, maybe there's a vegan Toastmasters that I could join, where people would be more open to talking about these serious existential threats. At the same time, you know, enjoying a Toastmasters learning program. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there, that there's not very many people joining in on this conversation for whatever reason. And even the environmental groups, I'll just finish with this, even the environmental groups don't necessarily want to drill into the real root cause. So case in point is part of this Calgary Climate Hub that I joined. I'm no longer a member. They're currently, their 3 top initiatives are free public transit, being involved with the distribution of any government environmental funds, and there was a third one, but it was also like solar energy, solar panels. No, it's actually green building design. Those are the 3 top initiatives. It's just, and when I do present, like I did present Dr. Rao's white paper, crickets. So I don't know. Anyway, that's my rant. I can't stay for too much longer, so I'll sign off soon, and I'll be back for the Divine Feminine.
Thanks, Miles. I also going to go shortly, but come back later. But I wanted to In regard to this Brooklyn Eats, which I'm just hearing about, I just sent a message. I don't know if some of you know already, Phelan Grantier. He's in Brooklyn. He's a good friend. He's actually very, very close and a longtime friend of Lauren Mignon. And he's working on, and I think he's got a sizable group already in Brooklyn, working on a DAO, a Brooklyn DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. So I don't know if he already knows about Brooklyn Eats or if you already know him and know about his Brooklyn DAO project, but there's something waiting to happen there. So I just wanted to place that, Jamen and whoever else is.
Yeah, if you would be good enough to send an email intro, that would be super cool, or just any kind of info. You're on mute, Charlie.
Sorry. Yeah, I just invited him here, and so he might show up anytime. I sent him the email for the block party, and I also sent him a text with the Zoom link. And so, you know, and I also asked him, and I'm not sure, I have some information. I haven't been able to really follow it, but there's some materials, but I don't know what's shareable at the moment about that. But yeah, likely there's already some kind of cross-pollination in progress, just knowing how things are. But yeah. He's great.
Yeah, no,
and, yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd love to be introduced. If he comes here, great. But you know, even if he doesn't, I'd love an email intro, and then I can, you know, introduce myself.
Is there something? Yeah, I can do that right now. And is there something kind of quick you can tell me about who's over there or where it's at?
So it's interesting. Actually, nobody is over there right now. We're not working with anyone in Brooklyn at the moment.
Oh, come on. What? as they would say in Brooklyn, what?
Okay. No, that's a very reasonable question. I would be asking the same question if I were in your shoes, Charlie. Wait, you want to do something in Brooklyn, but you don't have anyone in
WHUT. What?
yeah, exactly. What? So, but let me just explain. So here's how Brooklyn Eats did not start. It didn't start in Brooklyn. The way that it did start was it started with the conversation, which we've been having for a few weeks now. You know, how do we save life on Earth? And so we started with this big picture of feeding everyone, and then it became a question of where to start. And the question of where to start, we took it very objectively and didn't say, well, let's start here because this is where I live. No, we said, all right, you know, where is the best place in the world for this to start? And that's how we hit on Brooklyn. Right. And
quick comment, and then I actually have to take care of a few things, and it was very spontaneous for me to join, and it's been too long, so this is great, of course. Actually, there's a lot of great reasons. Let me just try to be brief about it. There's a lot of great reasons to pick Brooklyn, and I'm sure you kind of went through all of that. It's among other things, it gets attention. It's hip, it's trendy, it's sexy, and all of that. The less trendy and less sexy, but actually much more critical epicenter of the pandemic in the entire United States is, and by the way, you might know that Brooklyn is Kings County. Now I'm a New Yorker, so I'm going to, drop some science here on Brooklyn, but more particular, Queens. So Kings County is Brooklyn. Queens County is Queens. Queens, New York is not physically as big as Brooklyn. Brooklyn is massive size-wise, geography. It is actually, and I don't know how it's ranked in the last few years since I checked, but traditionally it ranks as the top in the world for cultural diversity concentration, however they measure that. Queens, New York. It also happens to be the epicenter of the coronavirus. In fact, Corona Queens, I'm not kidding, you can't make this stuff up, is the epicenter of Queens. And it's just kind of, and I have a lot of close friends and really amazing artists, community, culturally, the richest, I mean, in terms of jazz and music and a whole lot of things. Queens is like the epicenter culturally. Okay. And Brooklyn too, for sure. So I don't know, maybe it's not just Brooklyn, but it's king and queen, both. I'm just riffing here. I got some close people in both places. But there's
Beautiful.
Fallon with the Brooklyn Dow, by the way. So that's kind of, coming together in a meaningful way. And somebody asked in the chat about information. I don't have anything to share yet, but I think Fallon will probably show up. We'll see.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlie.
If I might interject there a second there, Jamen, just for Charlie there. Charlie, as Jamen was explaining, this is kind of like being preliminary discussions about where we can start off, what solutions we've come up with so far and launch them and everything else from. And Brooklyn was narrowed down. I mean, at one stage it was we were thinking about Louisville, even Cork City here in Ireland. There's lots of places being looked at and suggested, but we kind of came down on Brooklyn there over a week ago. But the idea of a certain borough as well was suggested as well last week anyway as well. So like nothing is fixed yet, but we have homed in on Brooklyn is what we're saying. Like, but we do have solutions, and it's time to let the general general public see like that they're valid solutions, and they're just the beginning of solutions that we need to work on.
Has any on your side, anyone over there has sort of written anything down, made any outlines, or sketched on aside from conversation?
Yeah, I've got tons of stuff written up over the last few weeks, but hasn't been cleaned up. And what I'm actually tempted to do is just start a blog on Radish and just dump it, because I'll voice dictate several pages per day, but I haven't cleaned it up and put it into any organized form. But anyway, that's an intention of mine. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think I'm gonna take my leave and leave a kind of parting shot here, which is friendly reminder to get thee to Twitter. You can just have wonderful open conversations in very bite-sized forms. And I know that there's a Radish Twitter account, but I think that it's been kind of really sleeping always, maybe. So time to wake up Twitter, I would suggest. Could be good.
Definitely. Thank you, Charlie. Yeah, really good point there. Really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I've embraced that in the last more than half a year, and you sort of get out what you put in, but there's tons of people out there, and I would certainly share stuff and amplify, and yeah, it's another idea.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charlie. Definitely.
So cool. I will actually get this email intro going, and then I'll catch you guys later, I'm sure, at some point.
Awesome. Well, we'll be here for the next 23 hours. So
there's just one thing. Actually, two quick announcements. I'm sorry, I'm hogging the mic here. I guess later today, 11 o'clock my time. I guess that's 2 o'clock Pacific. There's a town hall with Yanir Baryam, who's the founder of endcoronavirus.org. And that's a program of the New England Complexity Science Institute. And from the very beginning, he's been at the forefront of a lot of data and research and amazing work. And he's doing a kind of co-hosting along with, I forgot the name now, but the guy, there's an author of something called The Black Swan, some of you might know about, and they're having a town hall today, so that you can find that at endcoronavirus.org, probably /town hall or something like that. Next week, Tuesday, actually just after you guys start with the Radish call on Tuesday, CICOLAB is taking over the Metacogs, the Open Learning Commons. So that's at noon Pacific, 9 o'clock over here. And that we will be having a look at crap detection, data, and metrics. And so I'm going to pack a little bit more in here, which is that we're kicking off the next month-long cycle of roundtable discussions for Collective Intelligence Collaboratory. And that will be the first of the series. The series is titled Rapid Sense-Making and the Pandemic. And so the icing on the cake with that session on Tuesday, again on data, metrics, and crap detection, is a sort of the guru of crap detection himself, Howard Rheingold, will be with us, among others. It's going to be really kind of action-packed. So now you know. say, noon Pacific on Tuesday is something that's going to take away from you guys, but we'll bring it back. I'm out. I'm complete.
Very good. Very good. Awesome, Charlie. Wow. Great updates. Great stuff. Look forward to having you back, and looking forward to a longer form conversation with you where we can get into all this.
I'll pass along the info, I guess, in your email, Jamen, and you can share that accordingly.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Charles. Awesome.
Okay. Much love, everyone. I'll see you soon.
All right. See you soon, Charlie. Take care. So, good stuff. Now, Miles, were you in the middle of a thought there? Anyway, just jump in, anybody, you guys, when you want. But I've moved the party outside. How's my audio, by the way? Am I reasonably clear?
Yeah, you're reasonably clear. It was a bit a little crackly, all right, because Charlie didn't mute his mic there either. Like.
Ah, okay. So when others don't mute their mics, it gets a little crackly. Okay, but for the moment, pretty good.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, yeah, just let me know, because in the worst case, I'll just lose the headphones and just go on regular speaker and give that a try. But back to the conversation. I was giving one possible answer, or outcome rather, of the conversation, which is a complete solution, a complete holistic solution for how do we save life on Earth. And so I can't emphasize enough, this is just one answer. I'm not saying this is the answer, but one answer is feed everyone whole food, plant-based diets, delivering it to their homes, in the process transform community, right? Stone soup style, because if you get the community engaged in feeding everyone, I mean, just like the story Stone Soup, there's no way that's not going to transform the community, radically transform, deeply transform the community. So the big whole solution then, and this gets to step 1, 2, 3. So the goal is, well, I won't say much about the goal now. We've talked plenty about that over the weeks. And the strategy, feed everyone, unite community, but also a big part of the strategy is in the process of uniting, bringing everyone together to feed the whole communities. We will invite them to participate in the collective intelligence, because the way to make Brooklyn Eats or Operation Stone Soup happen, or any other facet of this, is collective intelligence, right? So here's how I envision. Okay, and then steps 1, 2, 3. Well, there's some preparation, obviously, but the singularity within the singularity, right? So think of. Let me unpack that for a second. So if the whole project is to transform the whole world, save all of life on Earth, it starts in one specific geographical location, which is Brooklyn. So we call Brooklyn the Brooklyn singularity, because it's one single place on Earth. Now, the singularity of Brooklyn, in turn, inside of Brooklyn, there's a singularity. And that's what I call the singularity within the singularity. So the singularity within the singularity is the press conference, where we announce to the world, this is what we're doing. We're feeding everyone in Brooklyn, whole food, plant-based, delivering straight to their homes. And this in turn is part of Operation Stone Soup. We're starting here in Brooklyn and then taking it around the world. And Operation Stone Soup, you may think it's all about food, but it's not. Yes, it includes food. It starts with food, but it's really all about collective intelligence. It's about the world coming together, not just the Brooklyn community coming together, but the world coming together to solve our problems, starting in Brooklyn,
Yeah,
right?
I'll just carry on where I left off with respect to Indigenous people came up with value change for survival. So in other words, the choice is ours. We have to have conversation about what it is that we value. And the Brooklyn Eats is this fantastic way to get the conversation started. What do we value? So Brooklyn Eats is saying, here, we're coming to you. We want to have the conversation, and we're going to gather around this food that we've prepared for everybody. And this is what this food consists of, and this is how it was generated. At the same time, you could say, now, had we been serving you hamburgers and hot dogs, this would be the storyline for your hamburgers and hot dogs. This is the storyline for what we are serving you today. And on the storyline for the hamburgers and hot dogs and the chicken nuggets, that storyline is involving the slaughter of 76 billion with a B animals annually. You know, so anyway, I think the Brooklyn Eats concept is absolutely fantastic because, as I said, there's not very many people that are, they're unconsciously resistant to getting deep, you know, so you have to somehow approach it with this Brooklyn Eats concept. Anyway, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Miles. Emery, you got your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks. You know what? I got just a terrible gut, you know, because and an aching Achilles heel, you know. For some reason, you know, I'm hung up on one issue, you know, with the eats thing, you know, and that is the delivery. I see that as a monumental, huge, I mean, it's a miserable task. My gut wrenches when I try to envision how that will be accomplished, you know. That's the Achilles heel in this whole thing. I know how important it is. And I do understand that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of deliveries being made all the time in a big city like that. But, you know, the times that we're living in now, even that, it's such a strain. I really, really need some kind of medication when it comes to delivery.
Can I offer you some relief, Emery? Okay, so here's some relief. So if you envision delivering food to everyone, let's say one meal at a time, one household at a time, one, you know, two-door delivery mini vehicle at a time, right? It's totally untenable, totally impractical, borderline impossible, right? On the other hand, imagine this scenario, okay? Imagine a 20-foot truck pulls up in front of a building, an apartment building in Brooklyn that's got maybe 200 units, right? The delivery truck pulls up. There are 200, you know, crate size, reusable, you know, Amazon Fresh like delivery boxes in the back of that truck. The back of the truck is opened up. A couple of volunteers from the truck start unloading boxes, and a dozen volunteers from the building come down and meet the truck at the bottom. What do? They unload all the boxes. Now they're on the sidewalk, all these boxes. All the volunteers, the truck people, everybody has the appropriate protection on, and the appropriate procedures. This is all about procedure, right? Talk to Miles about procedure. He was in the railroads for decades, right? The trains don't run because, you know, people are making good snap judgment calls here and there, though that's also crucial. There are procedures. It runs like a big clock, right? Canadian Railways runs like a giant clock, and there's a big computer that tracks everything, and there's processes for everything. And you don't just make it up as you go along. You stick by the book, the checklist. Likewise here, process, by the book, checklist, do it right. So the truck comes up, we drop off 200 Amazon-sized crates in front of the building. There's a dozen volunteers there. 2 of them stand guard. The other 10 are up and down the elevators and the stairways making deliveries. At the end of that, the truck goes back to the warehouse where they got the big industrial kitchens going, cranking out the food, and they load it up with another 200 tubs for another building somewhere. And they go and they do that drop, right? So it's really, and then now let's suppose that the drop is being made in a neighborhood somewhere, like, you know, a cul-de-sac neighborhood where it's houses instead of buildings, right? Similar situation. Truck pulls up in the cul-de-sac, drops off a dozen boxes, big boxes. There's a volunteer who was already committed to be there to meet them, who's established that they have a reputation of being on time, et cetera, right? And, you know, the truck doesn't leave until the volunteer is confirmed. Volunteers there, great, drop off the food. But again, let the local neighborhood, the local building, those volunteers will do the work for the final,
And
you know,
it
50
also,
yards.
it can also be presented as a educational and learning event for the community, an opportunity for job skills enhancement. And I'm glad you mentioned really keeping it as a concept, like run it like a scheduled railroad, or railway, as we say in Canada. And that, you know, it is procedural, and there is a lot of rules, standard operating procedures that have to be adhered to. And to that end, incorporate the National Safety Council of the United States. The National Safety Council is an amazing organization. They have a program called Journey to Excellence. So in other words, you'll have this run in the membership with the National Safety Council and their Journey to Excellence. And that will help you make sure that, you know, nobody's going to get hurt, but that it's also done efficiently, and that there's training as required, so that your risk is managed effectively. And maybe the National Safety Council would say, okay, you're a nonprofit, and we think this is a great idea too. And they may actually extend, perhaps, I'm not speaking for them, I can't, but maybe they would even donate. And I will tell you, there's a lot of resources that they offer for free, you know, materials. If you go check out their website, there's a lot of free stuff just right out of the gate. Anyway, I am complete.
Just gonna add something to what I was saying before. Sounds good, Miles. Look, what's missing in the conversation are those people, like we've had introduced in our party a while back. Is what's missing are the people getting involved in this conversation, like those delivery guy people with the big truck, and the farmer, and the people that are gonna be forking out. You know, we gotta find a way to get those people involved in the conversation, so that they can open their lips and give some verbal clarification to, as the ways and means how they're gonna participate and all that business, you know. We got to take care of that business at some point, and sooner the better, because, you know, that press conference is on the verge, okay? And I don't see the ducks lining up in the row. So we got to get the ducks lined up. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and that's actually why we're having this conversation, because in terms of lining up the ducks in a row, okay? Let's say, let's just take layers of ducks, right? At the top layer, you have the conversation, right? The next layer down, you have what I'll just call, I came up with this term in the last few days, hyper solutions. A hyper solution is really a set of solutions, including some mega solutions like SRM, including strategies, including some mega strategies like Operation Stone Soup, and including stories, right, that help spread, that can go viral, etc., right? So you have the conversation, you have hyper solutions, and then so this is one hyper solution, Operation Stone Soup, which has a starting point of Brooklyn, etc. And I really want to keep it big picture, because this really helps me think about it. Because what's crucial is the crossing of the chasm, right? We're still on Gilligan's Island. We're still just talking to each other. The rest of the world doesn't know about us or any of this. And so what I'm envisioning is that within the conversation, right? Let's say the first step is to promote the conversation, even before any well-formed hyper solutions have been well-formed. And I wouldn't call Operation Stone Soup particularly well-formed at this point. I think it's a great idea, a great concept, but it's not well-formed. There's a lot of work to be done. So imagine that we promote the conversation as this giant meme. You know, how do we save life on Earth? That is the conversation. And we get a bunch of groups into the conversation, and we form a whole network of conversations centered around the conversation, right? And of this whole network of conversations, certain hyper solutions start to emerge, like Operation Stone Soup, right? And then a community can form around it. Right now, we've got a tiny, teeny community forming around Operation Stone Soup. And I would like to see that community grow by leaps and bounds. But again, back to the big picture, there is the conversation. There will be multiple hyper solutions that will be promoted, that will come out of the conversation. And that's how it should be, in my view, so that we can kick around and compare and contrast and explore and develop and evolve different hyper solutions until one community backing one hyper solution gets it together to the point that they're ready to do a press conference, right?
And, you know, I'll pitch in here, building on what Emery said, it's really important. Involve all the existing stakeholders. And, you know, it could have started in any city that was interested, but because the president of the borough of Brooklyn is already vegan and understands the personal health benefits, that's why, and there's other connections too. Jackie came up with the Brooklyn concept as the starting city because of her being a person born in that area. So you have Emery, very important. You know, there's existing companies, trucking companies, couriers, there's existing city infrastructure and resources to be leveraged. So that is really critical. Now, what I wanted to say is we're just getting the idea started, and eventually you'll want a pilot project. So it could be that there's just one block in Brooklyn that we do that I won't say we, because I'm in Canada and I'm just here at the block party sharing ideas for what they're worth. But whoever carries this forward might say, well, we've focused on Brooklyn, but now we're just focusing on a particular block community in Brooklyn. And we're going to, just work through the whole concept, from getting the raw materials of fruits and vegetables and then cooking them up, packaging them, delivering them, and involving people in this community in the entire process with a risk management plan, safety management system, National Safety Council involvement. And again, the storyline of, had we served this, the people that are doing it, had they served hot dogs and hamburgers and chicken nuggets, this would be the storyline. The food that that's being presented by the people today, though, was plant-based, universal meal, working with the K-Mama app, and this is how it came together in comparison and contrast. So, and I'll just summarize. Since thinking, making a burger out of beans and chickpeas and other ingredients versus a hamburger that I used to eat, I realized that, wow, yeah, there's so many benefits to making the bean burger. And when I think about how easy it is, you could actually, of course, with sterile conditions, you could make large amounts of bean burgers, delicious bean burgers, and serve them with a vegan bun and lettuce and tomato and everything else that you like. And you could make that in like a cement mixer and just crank out the burgers like crazy, with so much less required regarding hygienic controls, because you're just dealing with beans, parsley, corn. I think the recipe calls for some corn chips as well, crushed up in there to give it more crunch, versus what you would have to go through to keep things sanitary in order to, all along the line, to deliver chicken nuggets, hot dogs, and hamburgers. I think the contrast would be so obvious.